Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
To get into these schools is not just a question of money, it is a question of sitting stringent entrance exams, which are tough. So to say that these kids just got in because of mum and dad's wealth is not true, and it's underplaying their achievement.
No. The point I'm making, Sam, hold on. The point I'm making is that just because you could afford to go to a private school doesn't mean that there are unintelligent people at state schools.
I didn't say that.
No, I know you didn't say that. I'm saying that's my point. I'm saying that's what I'm saying.
My son, for instance, I send my son to one of these schools, the 8 schools that you talk about. I'm not wealthy, okay, I work hard.
How much does it cost a year?
Pardon?
How much does it cost you?
30 grand.
Well, then you are wealthy, Sam.
Well, okay, but what I'm saying is...
So why did you deny it?
There are people out there who make...
Why did you, Sam, wait, why did you deny it? If you're paying 30 grand a year to send your child to school, then you are wealthy compared to most people in this country. Do you know why, Sam?
Yeah.
Because what's the average salary in the UK?
Yeah, sub 30,000, I know that.
If the average salary is under 30,000, you're paying 30,000 just for your child's school fees, which is more than most people make in a year, then why are you describing yourself as not wealthy? Do you not see that as somehow tone deaf to the struggles of most people in this country?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that we have worked hard.
Well, but Sam, I'm not saying you've not worked hard, but so does the road sweep. Do you think the road sweep doesn't work hard?
I know, but whenever you try and engineer a quota, you are, by definition, penalising some versus the other.
There is no quota. This is not a quota. The quota's working the other way. The head teacher's complaining about a subconscious quota. He's saying that the teachers are doing this to try and increase diversity without a quota. And I'd say to you, actually, if he's complaining about an unofficial quota, which are his words, the actual truth is the unofficial quota has been working in the opposite direction. Why aren't you complaining about the fact that there are 7% of this country go to private schools, and yet, according to your figures, 30% of them end up at Oxford and Cambridge? Is that not an unofficial quota system favouring private schools?
Well, it may be to do with the fact that these schools and the kids that go to these schools have made the effort to, for instance, get into these schools and to work hard and achieve top grades, and that's why they get in. Sam,
again, you're completely tone deaf to the conversation. What do you mean made the effort? You think kids from state schools don't make effort?
No, I didn't say that.
No, I know you didn't say that. I'm not saying you said that. I'm asking you whether you think that. I'm not saying you did say it. I'm saying there is an implication in your tone when you say they worked hard and they got there, or I work hard and I'm not rich and I make a lot of money so I can pay $30,000 a year for my kid's school. And Sam, the thing is, the implication in the way you're speaking and the tone is that the person that's on the minimum wage doesn't work hard, or the kid in state school doesn't work hard to get admissions into the top universities. And that's why I'm cautioning you against speaking in that way, Sam, because it can sound tone deaf.
Equal. So therefore, the entrance...
Sorry, was he just talking all over the... Did you just carry on talking, Sam?
Potential.
Sam, did you hear anything I just said?
No.
Oh, all right. You're going to call yourself not rich, and I don't have a problem with it. If you pay £30,000 a year for getting a kid into private school, I'm good on you. If you're making that much money, then enjoy it for your family's sake. It's not that I don't mind, that I mind wealth. But actually, if you're going to speak on radio about... in entitled tones about how kids from private school work hard and so they deserve to go to Oxford and Cambridge, as if kids from state school don't work hard. And then if you're going to carry on talking while I'm asking you a question, then that smacks of entitlement and you're not doing yourself any favours.
Just like Jeremy Corbyn is doing. They are exactly the same, Maajid, yeah?
Hold the line, Billy. Don't go anywhere. Paul, tell us what you think.
Well, I'd like to engage you on logical discussion, not histrionic emotion, of the 2 points that you've raised, which is the no-deal Brexit and what the American Congress is saying. Yeah. So what I want to ask you is, when Boris is saying we will go with no deal unless we get a proper deal, I want you to tell me what the alternative to the no deal is.
Well, I don't believe in Brexit in the first place, so if you want me to tell you, I'll give you an alternative.
But you see, you can't. What is the alternative to the no deal?
I'll tell you.
You don't believe in Brexit is totally irrelevant. What's the alternative to the no deal?
I'll answer your question, Paul. If you want me to tell you specifically what I think should happen next, it's a motion of no confidence in this Prime Minister who only has a majority of one, and then that, within the 14-day period that is statutorily triggered, I think the Speaker, Bercow, should be appealed to pass another act of legislation which cancels October the 31st as Brexit Day, but instead holds a second referendum to put back to the people whether they choose Theresa May's deal, no deal, or to stay in the European Union by cancelling Article 50. Why not, Paul?
But it's not going to happen because there's no sign of it happening.
Well, what do you mean there's no sign of it happening? Boris Johnson has a majority of one, and the signs of it happening will be after October the 9th, when Parliament sits after recess. There's no signs of it happening right now because we're in the summer recess, Paul.
Going to happen.
Paul, did you just... I just answered your question, and you carried on speaking. So let me try again. We're in the summer recess, which is why there's no signs of it happening. Why do you say that it can't happen once Parliament reconvenes?
You know that, and even most of the Remainers know that that's not going to happen.
No,
okay?
what? Sorry,
and
what's not going to happen?
Second point.
No, Paul, hold on. No, we're not going anywhere. You're gonna please address the point I've just put to you. Why is it that you're saying it can't happen? Please present to me a technical, procedural reason why what I've just described can't happen.
But there's no sign.
Was he just talking? Did he just keep talking again? Paul, are you listening to me, Paul?
You're saying...
Paul, are you actually listening to a question I put to you?
But I have answered you. You have answered me with a fantasy because that is not going to happen.
Yeah, and I've asked you why. Please explain to me why it's not going to happen.
No sign of it happening. I'm telling you, you can't ask me why something that isn't going to happen because there is, in fact, you can point to no sign of it happening.
That's not very logical, is it, Paul? You said you were going to talk about logic. The absence of a sign that it's going to happen means it's definitely not going to happen. Is that the logic you're using here? It's quite weak.
It's happening. How is it going to happen?
Well, I've just described to you how it's going to happen. I've just given you the procedure.
But there's no sign of anybody doing it.
That's because they're all on holiday, Paul. Why am I talking to a brick wall? Billy, can you hear Paul?
On the Remainers side.
But Paul, Billy wants to say something to you.
But, I mean, basically, this is Boris Johnson and Donald Trump making it up as they go along. They're populist politicians, mate. That's what they are. Somehow they got themselves elected. And they've got a lot of... They have, like Boris Johnson, has a lot of support toward the people around where I live in Essex, big Leave voting area, they just they don't see the detail. It's like Boris doesn't see the detail, let's get it done,
Paul?
But look, things happen that you don't like, and you might say you don't like them. That doesn't stop them from happening. You cannot point to me now to any convincing coalition.
You don't need a coalition, Paul.
Did
I mention the word coalition? You do not need a coalition to do what I just described. You keep ignoring the point I made. It's almost as if you're willing yourself not to hear the fact that I've answered your question. It's almost as if you're in disbelief that your question was answered and are therefore trying to pretend it wasn't answered by reiterating the assertion you made at the beginning of the conversation. It won't happen because it can't happen. But I just described to you how it can happen, and you're still insisting, well, because there's no sign of it currently happening, it won't happen. Well, the reason there's no sign of it currently happening is because they're all on holiday. Parliament isn't in session at the moment. So obviously there's no sign of it currently happening, Paul. I'm sorry, but we know that there's a permanent disagreement between Jeremy Corbyn, quite rightly, will not relinquish his position. You don't need that. As the head of the opposition. You do not need Jeremy Corbyn to relinquish his position to do what I've just described. You clearly didn't listen to what I've just described. Let me try again, Paul. Let me describe it again for you, Paul, so you can actually hear me and then perhaps come to terms with the fact that I have actually answered your question and that you can't just repeat an assertion that it's not going to happen, being in denial that I've just demonstrated how it can potentially happen. Boris Johnson has a majority of one, Paul. And so a motion of no confidence is likely to pass because Parliament has already, by majority, through an indicative vote, voted against a no-deal scenario. So we know, through an indicative vote, that there is a majority in Parliament for no deal, for voting against a no-deal scenario. So if a motion of no confidence was put to Boris Johnson's Parliament before October the 31st, it is likely that, because he only has a majority of one, that motion of no confidence passes. That triggers a statutory 14-day period within which Parliament needs to form a new government. Instead of forming a new government, they're hurtling towards a general election in 14 days. Instead of trying to form a new government, if the only thing they did was to get special dispensation from the Speaker of the House, Bercow, who's already indicated he'd be sympathetic to doing such a thing, and they put forward instead an act of legislation that cancelled the 31st of October as Brexit Day, and instead tacked onto that act of legislation, said we need to go back for a second referendum to put to the people whether they want Theresa May's deal, no deal, or to stay in the European Union. There's every chance that even the Conservatives would then back that act of legislation, because if they didn't, they'd have a general election on their hands within 14 days with no Brexit having happened yet. And so I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm saying That's one example of how it can happen, Paul. And so why do you keep insisting that it cannot happen?
Well, I think there's no chance of it happening because at this moment you see enough discussion about this. Jeremy Corbyn has already put back his vote of no confidence.
But Paul, everything I've just described to you doesn't need Jeremy Corbyn. Can you not see that?
But somebody has to put forward but if Jeremy Corbyn has put back his vote of no confidence, that means the people who support him won't vote for it if somebody else tries to get it.
The people won't vote against the no-deal scenario?
What's up with this? Let me tell
Parliament's already voted against a no-deal scenario in an indicative vote, so all you need to do this time is make sure it's not indicative. Parliament has already shown us it's got a majority against no-deal. So why do you keep insisting that the reality isn't what the reality is, Paul?
That is not the reality because there are internal reasons in the Labour Party and in the Conservative Party why that vote won't be won.
And what's that? What internal reasons are they, Paul?
Of that,
is that analysis, Paul, or is that fact? Because you've asked me to give you a possible route for how we can avoid a no-deal scenario. Now, if you were to say that's a possible route, but I think it's unlikely to succeed, we could be having a reasonable conversation. But if you insist that the possible route I've outlined to you won't succeed based upon interpretation, then you must concede that's your analysis. It's not fact, Paul.
Now, let me ask you about the second point.
Oh, but first, did you hear what I just said?
Well, no, because I was talking over you. Now, let me talk. Look, we must have agree to disagree on that. You think that's going to happen. You've actually conceded it's most unlikely. Now, I agree with you. There is a remotest possibility, but I think it is so unlikely it's not worth bothering about because we've already got indications of why it's not going to happen.
Well,
I can understand why you'd like it to happen.
I don't think it's an unlikely scenario.
I'm not scared of it. I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, you have every right not to think it's going to happen, but you can't insist it's not going to happen because you don't know.
I will concede your point that what I should say is not it cannot possibly happen, but it is most unlikely to happen.
There you are. Thank you. Logic prevails finally.
Now, can I move to the second point?
Indeed, you may.
The key point.
Yes, go for it.
The second key point is this. The GFA does not mention the border except in one context, which it says the removal of the military post, which was done a long time ago. So the GFA does not mention the border. The concern about the border is that is the reason for it appearing as the backstop and being highly desirable, which the UK accepts because the UK has kept that open border for nearly 100 years. That is part of UK policy. Is that not to give a target for IRA terrorists. That's what it's all about. But you say that can what the UK suggests actually happen? Well, the Irish are already planning to do it. In the Irish Times on the 9th of July, there was an article by an Irish journalist about the Irish government which said, in the event of a no deal, therefore no backstop Brexit, the Irish government would actually carry out the checks that it needs to do behind the border. There's been further reports since then that they're actually discussing that with the EU.
Right, so Paul, it's not like you're saying anything that other Brexiters haven't insisted on before, but apart from your interpretation of the Good Friday Agreement, that still doesn't deal with the free movement of people question. If there's no border there, that means that the 70 million Turks that you lot were concerned about could still walk over that border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, true?
That carries on. That is part of the current common travel area, which carries on, regardless.
No, there's no. If we leave the European Union, right, currently, and I've had this going around in circles, currently, if you come from France to Britain, you need to show your passport because we're not in the Schengen zone. If you come from France to Ireland, the Republic, which is also not in the Schengen zone, you need to show your passport, right? But if you come from the Republic of Ireland into Northern Ireland, you don't need to show anything. You can just waltz on across that dividing line, which is no longer a border, and you could just walk into the Northern Ireland. But after Brexit, the question is, should people in the Republic of Ireland still be allowed to walk straight in into the north of Ireland? And if you say yes, then you've got to deal with the freedom of movement question, that if you come from France to the Republic of Ireland, you need to show a passport. Now you're in the Republic of Ireland. What's stopping European citizens who are legally in Ireland, having come from the Schengen zone, just to walk into the United Kingdom?
Because citizens of the European Union will be able to walk into the United Kingdom anyway, because there'll be no visas.
Well, how do you know all these things, Paul? Right now, the European Union is saying if Boris Johnson doesn't pay the $39 billion divorce bill, they're not even going to begin trade negotiations. And you're insisting we'll have visa-free travel. How do you know? What crystal ball do you have that tells us this is all going to be hunky-dory? A bit like Boris Johnson telling us that we can easily cope with no deal. Meanwhile, he's trying to put the brakes on Donald Trump, saying we'll have a trade deal within 12 months. So it doesn't sound too easy to me. Anyway, Paul, we're unfortunately up against the news, so thank you anyway for that. Billy and Paul, Billy from Clacton, Paul from Bow, thank you for your conversation. Brendan wants to speak to us from Marylebone. Tell us what you think, Brendan.
Hi, Maajid. Yeah, you were saying earlier on that you think democracy should not trump truth. So basically, I would say that this is really a philosophical and a theological question. If Christianity is true, then we should have Sunday trading laws. If it isn't true, then I don't really see, unless anyone else can prove any other religion is true, then there shouldn't be any laws because no one's got any authority.
I can see where you're going with this. Well, because obviously otherwise I can sit here and insist that we should have Friday off then.
Yeah, exactly. Like if there is a God and there is truth, then we have a moral order and we should obey that order. But if there isn't a God, then there is no moral order, and then basically it's like the most powerful rule over everyone else, and everyone else should be a slave.
So what's your way forward through this, Brendan?
So really, I would say both. I think there is a philosophical and theological argument, good argument for Christianity, and it has done the Western world quite good, and so there's no proof really that it's wrong. Therefore, we should keep with Christianity as the basis of our society. But Christianity also says that we should be tolerant of other people. So, like, as that lady from Israel phoned up, and she said that certain groups don't have to close down on a Saturday. So, people who have religious exemptions, who have particular faith, they shouldn't have to close down on a Sunday. And so, we should respect different religions. You can have closing down on Sunday.
Then just lift the law and let people do what they want to do, because you're effectively saying that, but through the existing law, which would require a lot of red tape for people to apply for exemptions. So why don't you just lift the law and let Christians take Sunday off if they want to?
Well, because Christianity, as I was saying, like, if Christianity, it should be ultimately a theological and a philosophical question. If Christianity is true, or even if Christianity, if you can't even prove it true, but on a practical basis, it has proven to be a good system, and it has, because Western civilization is probably the most successful civilization of the world. That's
to do with Christianity, Brendan.
It is, yeah. Christianity is the basis of Western civilization.
No, but Brendan, Christianity was overthrown, and Europe went from the Dark Ages through the Reformation to the Enlightenment, not because of Christianity, but in spite of Christianity that was holding the Enlightenment back. How can you argue that the successes of Western civilization are because of Christianity? Surely they are in spite of Christianity. Now, that's not me saying that Christianity brought no value to society. Of course, all great traditions bring certain value to society, but you can't pin the success of Western society's quote-unquote success onto Christianity. I mean, I'm sure Buddhists would object to that, for example.
Well, we're living in Western civilization, as I was saying. There's been
Western,
a lot of...
not Christian, Western civilization. They're two different things. Yeah. America, for example, is a completely secular country, is it not, Brendan?
No, hold on a second. I haven't been given a chance to respond to your earlier point. The point is that historians have now shown that the Dark Ages is actually a myth. There was constant progress through those Christian ages, and that even the idea of the Enlightenment is also a myth. It's just that it's a steady progression, and there's a certain point, and most of the
so there was no... So hang on, Brendan, sorry, forgive me. The Spanish Inquisition? The wars of the Reformation? There wasn't a war, there wasn't a 30-year war, there wasn't the Inquisition. Religion didn't try and... Galileo wasn't persecuted? Religion didn't try and fight science?
Yeah, if I respond, you said the Spanish Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition has in fact shown in the 1990s to be a myth, that the Spanish Inquisition was the most enlightened court within the whole of Europe at that time. They've had specific records, and they found them to be very fair and very lenient, and that people...
What?
See, the thing is, history has been written by the victors.
Well, who are the victors? You've just said Christianity were the victors, which would mean Christianity wrote the history of the Spanish Inquisition and taught us how brutal it was. But now you're saying it wasn't that brutal, and therefore, because the victors wrote it, which by definition means that the Enlightenment, who were the victors, wasn't born of Christianity. If you think that the history that they wrote about Christianity was tarnished and wasn't true because they were the victors.
Christianity split during the Reformation, as you know, and it was written. There were certain people of the Protestant faith, and also of later on.
So you think, Brendan, that the Protestants wrote the history of the Inquisition to damage the Catholic Church?
That is precisely what happened.
Actually, so you think that the Catholic Church behaved in the most open and admirable manner through the Spanish Inquisition?
During the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition was actually an historic. Anyone can find this out on the internet. Was the most enlightened.
That great source of reference. Yes.
Was the most enlightened. People can find the historians.
Inquisitors, Catholic Spanish Inquisitors were the most enlightened.
At that time, there was much worse things going on.
Have you ever wondered, Brendan, why there's pork in almost every single Spanish dish?
Sorry?
Have you ever wondered why there is pork in almost every single Spanish dish?
No.
Had you not heard of the forced conversions of the Jewish population of Spain?
Well, people, I believe, were asked. This was by the. Wasn't necessarily by the Catholic Church as such. This was by the King and Queen of Spain, who said that the Jews and the Muslims could either leave Spain or convert. And that's, according to you, the most enlightened courts in history? Well, compared to what was going on at that time, at that time they felt that they were a threat to their society, and there were plenty of wars between the Muslims and the Christians, and so therefore they felt that they were too much of a threat to live in their society. And that's fine, is it? That's okay to forcibly convert people and either at pains of death either force them to become Catholic or kick them out of the country, which is what happened. But you're comparing a kind of an idea of anachronistically comparing a kind of an idea of what today's society is like to what society was like then. I'm not. I'm just comparing what Spain was like under, for example, in Andalusia, when Jewish and Moors were living together for 900 years. And of course, where the Jews ran to after the Inquisition was indeed the Ottoman Caliphate in Turkey, because again, they were protected. In those days, they used to get on with their Muslim cousins. It's in these days that there seems to be more of a problem. But relative to the times, which I do accept is the measure by which we should judge societies, relative to their times, it wasn't the Inquisition that was an example of the most enlightened course of practice, as evidenced by where the Jews fled to. They fled to Salonika in Turkey, what was then the Ottoman Empire, for sanctuary, because the Catholics were hounding Muslims and Jews from Spain. There's a reason, as I said, that almost every Spanish dish contains pork. It's the first time in life that I've ever heard somebody try to present the Spanish Inquisition as the bastion of enlightenment. I suppose that's a first time for everything. Brendan from Marylebone, good luck with your religion. Thank you for calling. And lots of people reacting to that caller who claimed that the Inquisition was a bastion of enlightenment. First time I've heard that rather revisionist take on history. Isla wants to speak to us from Merseyside in Liverpool. Welcome, Isla.
Hi, Amash. I just want to say the 10. Just stick to the 10. We've eroded them, the rat race we've become worldwide, and just ate away at the 10. I don't know how many are actually standing of the original 10. And all our religions in a bit. I don't do religion, I do faith.
Sorry, Isla, what are you saying? Stick to the 10. Sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
The 10 Commandments.
Oh, the 10 Commandments.
We're all based on
they're in shorthand now. Now, I didn't realise you were referring to the 10 Commandments as simply as the 10. It's the first time I've heard that.
10,
Stick to the 10
laws that everything is based on.
All right, folks, that's Life's Solution. Stick to the 10. I was asking my producers here, what is she saying? What's the 10? Right, okay.
The 10, yeah. Well, the 10, there are no 10 left, which is why we're all on our
Stick to the 10.
We're not standing up as people anymore because we're a rat race. We want to do what we want to do, Maj, and it seems so petty to say keep holy the Sabbath, and so does it say thou shalt not kill? It's legal to kill now. So
who's illegal to kill now, Isla?
Yeah, abortion's legal. You know,
abortion?
You can do that legally.
I'm
saying that the 10 have been eroded by us, the rat
10.
race, who want to do what we want to do. And as they're talking about indigenous people, I hope the shrinking headhunters get the gits in authority or after the oil.
So can I push you on this, Isla? I mean, apart from you claiming murder has been legalised because of abortion, but actually the 10 involve more than that, don't they? So the first one, I am the Lord thy God.
Yeah.
The second one, no other gods before me.
Yeah.
The third one, no graven images or likeness. So are we going to stick to that one? Are we going to ban carvings?
Well, we don't have to ban carvings. Secular Britain, as it is now, which isn't Christian at all, it's secular.
No, but you're asking us to stick to the 10.
Here worships the cash cow. That's who we all worship. The cash cow.
Isla, but you're asking us to...
golden calf.
Isla, ooh.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, I'm loving the religious references. You're asking us to stick to the 10, and I'm asking you whether that should include the third one, which is no graven images or likenesses.
Well, why do you want to bow down to a graven image anyway, unless you're a lunatic?
Well, I don't want to bow down to one. I might want to sculpture one as an artist.
You might want a piece of that cash cow. I mean, you've got to ask yourself, do you believe in law and order? Well, basically, all law and order is based on the 10 Commandments.
So law and order... So hang on. So if I stick to the 10, I should ban graven images, and that proves I believe in law and order. But if I want graven images, it means I don't believe in law and order?
Well, our country is so bizarre. There was a meeting the other month, where the person in charge was given the choice to say whatever she wanted. And she actually said something about, Satan, we love you, and it has happened, and we bow down before you. And everybody walked out.
I know, it's a bit confusing.
She happened to be a Satanist.
It's a bit confusing to me because, the thing with the 10 Commandments is you got things in here like don't kill people, which is fine, fine. Up there with don't create graven images, and also things like don't take the Lord's name in vain. And so if you want to say...
take the Lord's name in vain.
If you want to say stick to the 10, should we have a law that bans taking the Lord's name in vain as well?
Well, I wouldn't like to take the Lord's name in vain.
No, but should it be...
I wouldn't do that.
But should it be prohibited by legislation?
It doesn't have to be. It's written in the 10. Every time you break the 10, you walk in more and more into a zone of less law and order, and you walk into danger.
Yeah, but the 10 also say don't make graven images, and I'm wondering what the purpose of that is. What's wrong with me making a sculpture?
What's wrong with you making a sculpture and bowing down towards a sculpture?
Well, I'm not bowing down to it, am I? I'm not worshipping the thing.
You know, because you put it in the context of don't adore these graven images.
Yeah, that's one of the 10.
Yeah, well, don't take the Lord's name in vain.
Well, I know that's one of the 10 too, but what's your point? I'm trying to work out.
The point is, thou shalt keep holy the Sabbath day, which is what we're talking about.
All right, Isla, I'm not so sure we made heads or tails of that, but thank you very much for trying with me at least.
It was always going to be. The party leaders agreed to further meetings. Some notable absentees from that meeting, or a particularly notable absentee from that meeting, was the former Attorney General, Dominic Grieve, who says he's happy to talk to Boris Johnson at some point, but didn't attend those meetings. Jane has called from Hatfield and Stephen in Sunderland. I think we've got time for Jane before we go to the break. Jane, hello.
Hello, Sheila. I think they're all treacherous. Breaking it down, we wanted to leave the EU because we decided the EU was too dictatorial to us, and they had the reins on our laws, everything, for starters. They're being very treacherous. Boris Johnson wants no deal, so he's got something to bargain with, so we get a good deal for us Britons. We want a good deal. If it's a no-deal Brexit, we are in charge of our own destiny. We can do whatever we want. There's no problem with the backstop. We can either have a border or not have a border. We don't want a border because we're not looking after the Good Friday Agreement, end of. And
what do you mean we're not looking at? So you don't care about the Good Friday Agreement?
I do care about the Good Friday Agreement, and that's why we shouldn't have a border between Northern and Southern Ireland. Besides, I love them both. I love, the Northern Ireland being part of us, British, And I love the Southern Irish, being Southern Irish.
When you said the EU were too dictatorial, those were your words, too dictatorial.
Yes, very dictatorial.
All right, if the EU insisted on shutting down Parliament for 2 or 3 weeks so that a particular deal could get through, you'd naturally say, there they are, that's an example of their dictatorial nature. Boris Johnson is intending to do that, or hoping he can do that. That's dictatorial, Jane.
That maybe it is dictatorial, but
well,
the
it
treacherous
is
people
simply dictatorial.
Dictating that they think they know better than us.
They're not dictating.
Is wrong.
They're not dictating. No, they're not. Shall I tell you why they're not dictating? They are meeting, discussing their options, which they intend to bring to Parliament, our sovereign Parliament, where you and I put them, and they intend to have democratic votes about the things that they debate. Hang on. You've said they're treacherous. They intend to have democratic votes about the things that they wish to debate, and if the things they debate are passed with a majority, then in a very democratic way in our sovereign Parliament, they stand as law. If they don't, they won't stand as law. That's not dictatorial. Welcome, Jane, to the parliamentary democracy that you live in. Boris Johnson wants to knock it down for his own convenience for 3 weeks.
I know, but he wants a no deal without having to do that, so that all the other people, all the other traitors, can get on side with him.
Did you hear anything I just said to you?
I was listening to you, Sheila. I always agree with you on most things, but this, I don't.
But it's not about it, Jane. It's not about agreeing with me or disagreeing with me. All I've done is describe to you what a sovereign parliament works like. The sovereign parliament that Leave voters said we were losing. We were never losing it. We've still got it, and the MPs are using the fact that we still have it to try to stop a damaging no deal to this country. That's what's happening. It's not about agreeing or disagreeing with me. That's just Parliament happening.
Yes, thank you for explaining it to me from your side of the fence.
It's not a fence, it's a fact.
I won't go there.
Well, you have to, Jane. It's not a fence, it's a fact.
Okay, well, okay, Sheila, I really admire you and I respect you, honestly.
Well, I admire and respect you, Jane, for ringing and having a conversation about this, but it's really important that we work from the basis of facts. And when we don't, and when we make mistakes, and I have sometimes, it's important that we say that we have. But the truth of these meetings between MPs at the moment is that they are doing what you and I send them to Parliament to do, which is to act democratically on our behalf. And Boris Johnson to shut down Parliament is dictatorial, to use the word you used about the EU.
Okay, if he had to do that, yes, I agree, that would be. But he should not have to do that.
He doesn't have to do that. He shouldn't
have to do that.
He doesn't
All
have
the
to.
other MPs
He's choosing to.
should get on side with him and work for no deal.
Jane,
if the EU don't look after Britain.
Why should they? Why should they? Why should they? Since when does Parliament involve everybody agreeing with each other? Since when does politics involve everybody agreeing with each other? It's the opposite of that. It's fighting your corner.
It's a different scenario, isn't it?
No.
This divide is caused by a referendum that happened that we're going to leave. Now, all this stalling is undemocratic, isn't it?
But this isn't about stopping Brexit. This is about stopping no deal.
But it is, the Remainers will try and get us to remain because they're on huge pension pots promised, I'm sure.
But Jane, you're trotting out some well-rehearsed lines here. Many people in Parliament who voted to remain in the original referendum voted for Theresa May's withdrawal agreement 3 times. I'll give you examples. Ken Clarke, there's an example. You can think of Labour MPs as well who've done the same in order to get Brexit honoured and across the line. Now, shall I tell you who didn't? Lots of Tory MPs didn't vote for Theresa May's withdrawal agreement, so they were blocking Brexit, were they?
Oh, the whole thing was a shambles when Theresa May had the reins, because she had so many, Remainers leaning on her, and she was too weak to deal with them.
she had Remainers leaning on her, not in her party. She didn't. Thank you, Jane. Jane calling from Hatfield. Call from Harpington and Peter in Wimbledon, all the Duns, and I think you disagree with each other, so why don't you speak to each other and I'll have a few minutes off. Kevin, hello. You think that what's happening, these meetings with MPs, is itself undemocratic. Tell me why.
Well, I firstly agree with the caller from Hatfield, where she calls the Remain MPs traitors, mostly because David Cameron gave the House of Commons a free vote. No whip, to simply let the electorate have a referendum or not. They voted over 500 out of 650 to give us a referendum. On that basis alone, for the previous MP who was on to now suggest that he's a Leaver is a disgrace. Now, he
didn't say he was a Leaver. He didn't say he was a Leaver.
He did. He said he doesn't believe in Brexit. That's what he said. I listened to it.
So he's not a Leaver?
Sorry, a Remainer.
Okay,
sorry.
just checking. That's all right.
Sorry.
Just check. It's an easy mistake to make. Go on.
Okay, but the fact is that the polls at the time suggested very heavily that we would vote to remain. But we didn't. But the fact is, why did these MPs give us the vote and then they're not prepared to accept the outcome of it? It's as simple as that. So it's irrelevant if I believe in leave or remain. I actually believe more in democracy. And more people I speak to agree that it's democracy that should be triumphant. And whatever these MPs do in the future, how can we have any credibility with what they do when they've done a turncoat already?
Traitor and turncoat. Peter in Wimbledon. Hello. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Shelagh. I can't think of anything more undemocratic than asking people to make informed decisions on the most complex and important matter we're going to face in generations.
Yeah, but then the MPs should have voted not to give us a vote, shouldn't they? So I do hear what you're saying, but the MPs had a free vote to vote with their conscience. Should we let the electorate have a vote? They voted 6-1 to do so. And they've done it, in my belief, because they thought they're home and dry with the Remain campaign. They got caught out, and now they're squirming every single way, and they're calling the Brexiters undemocratic. They are not being democratic. It's as simple as that. They should have voted.
Kevin, let Peter respond. I'll come back to you, but go on, Peter.
For some very strange reason, that people think on the Brexit side that everything's so simple. The thing is they don't realise that when people voted in 2016 for Brexit, they had a variety of different reasons to vote for it. And I believe there are many people who had a genuine reasons and believing that their life is going to be better. And a lot of things were promised. And the things which were promised in 2016, they slightly differ, quite a lot differ from what we have now, what's available to us. And I think it is a duty of every politician in this country to do whatever they can to put the country before politics, party politics, and do what's best for the country and their constituents. And if today, let me just finish. If today people voted in small majority to go and jump off the cliff, the duty of our parliamentarian and our parliament will be to either build a wall in front of that cliff, give us parachute, or put a safety net in place. There is not a democracy if we're trying to prevent catastrophe and damage to this country. People on the Brexit side, the caller before you supported so greatly, she has no idea what she's talking about. You guys voted in 2016 to take control of our borders.
I didn't even say that.
Today you are telling us we don't need to have a border in Northern Ireland. Naive and ill-informed caller Jane thinks that we're just not going to put the border in Northern Ireland and that's going to be fine.
Okay.
All right, let Kevin come back in, Peter. Go on, Kevin.
So the MPs who are voted by the electorate should know all this before they went to give us the vote. They should have given the whole reason why we shouldn't have the vote in the first place. It was also our own MPs who, again, voted about 500 to activate Article 50, full in the knowledge that if they didn't get a deal done in 2 years, we revert to WTO rules. They knew that 2 years ago when they were voting. So they voted 500 to activate Article 50. They voted well over 500 to give us a vote. But it doesn't actually seem to me that they are actually prepared to respect either of them things that they both done.
But Kevin, that whole business of leaving the single market customs union and reverting to WTO rules, when people like David Cameron and other Remain campaigners alluded to that, they were shouted down as Project Fear. Fast forward 3 years, it's a plan. Well, hang on, Kevin. Listen carefully to what I'm putting to you. It was shouted down by Leave campaigners as Project Fear. Now it is the plan. How can you explain that?
I can explain it simply, that how can we... The other caller there, I forget his name, he has just
Peter.
said... that
You're
we should
very
have
bad with names, Kevin. You must pay attention to people. Peter.
He has suggested that we didn't know what we was talking about, or we don't know what. But really, that is not the point. If you vote in a Labour party and then Jeremy Corbyn does something...
No, you haven't answered my point, Kevin. You've dodged my point by berating Peter. It's a very important point. Now, no deal supporters are putting out clips of David Cameron talking about leaving with leaving the customs union, leaving the single market and reverting to WTO rules if we don't get a deal. They are putting that out as proof that people always knew. At the time, they decried every word of it as Project Fear. Utter nonsense. It won't happen because we'll get a deal, we'll have all the benefits, none of the disadvantages, we'll get a deal in days. You know that, Kevin.
Did the MPs not realise what they were voting for? Because I knew at the time.
You're dodging it again, Kevin. You are dodging it again, and I'm not. No, you are, and I'm not going to let you.
What is the exact question you want me to answer? So I'm not understanding it. Are you saying the MPs didn't know what they were voting for?
No, I'm not asking. I'm not asking about MPs. I'm saying because. Oh, hello. No, you're not going to let me say what I'm saying because you don't want to answer the question.
No, I will answer it, but I don't want you to detract from what I've phoned in. That the whole blame lies with the MPs. They've had 2 votes to vote things through, which they've done in Parliament.
You're making a point you made at the beginning, which we heard, and Peter responded to.
Have we? We haven't addressed it. But okay,
we have addressed it. Peter addressed it.
I'm failing to understand.
Well, it's very simple. So pay attention. And my name's Sheila, in case you forget it. Right, here we go.
Okay.
Right. During the campaign, David Cameron, he was no small figure at the time. He was the Prime Minister. He said, if we don't get a deal, and there is a risk of that, we will revert to WTO rules, World Trade Organization rules, with all that entails. Yes. He was shouted down by Leave campaigners at the time as indulging in Project Fear. Now, magically, 3 years down the line, that scenario that they said Cameron was using to scare voters with is apparently the plan. How do you explain that, Kevin? When it comes to voters being given proper information?
Through the democratic process, the MPs were given an option whether to vote to activate Article 50. Now they know very well, but they knew very, very well. If they didn't know, who would know that if the deal wasn't done in 2 years, we go to WTO rules. So if they were concerned about this 2-year deal, they shouldn't have voted it through, should they?
No, they shouldn't.
Okay, but they did.
Yeah, but how can you explain a man who thinks that no deal and those espousing no deal are now the guys and gals in the right place? How can you explain in the space of 3 years?
This is my answer to
How
can you explain that George Osborne said that if we voted to leave, we're going to be plunged into an immediate recession with 500,000 jobs gone?
Yeah.
That is vote to leave. It never happened.
No, it didn't. No.
That's the same as what you're saying. We don't know. We don't know.
It's not the same as what I'm happening. It's not the same as. It's not the same because
campaigning one side or the other.
Kevin,
you're going to pick out the best bits of your side.
No,
you don't want us to leave.
I'll tell you why it's not different. It's not different. I'll tell you why it's not the same. Is that nobody is campaigning now actively for that thing to happen. Whereas when it comes to no deal and WTO rules and the joys therein, the Leave campaigners who said we could get a deal in 2 days are now saying that WTO rules are the plan. Plan 5A and 5B, if you listen to Boris Johnson. And I just think you have allowed a total transformation of the message to happen by the people giving you the message that you're now supporting.
I think you are not answered the question. Why would anybody in this country have any confidence in any other vote that we have when the politicians haven't even carried out the result of the first referendum? Well, if we had another referendum...
You can't criticise Theresa May for trying. The withdrawal agreement is still there.
It was the Remain MPs that have frustrated her. We all know that.
Have you heard of Jacob Rees-Mogg, Ian Duncan-Smith, Andrew Bridgen, Mark Francois, the lady whose name escapes him at the moment, angry Irish woman, what's her name? Somebody tell me. Labour voter, Labour MP, Kate Hoey. Kate Hoey.
It doesn't matter.
It does matter because it's disproving what you've just said, Kevin. That's why it matters.
My only concern is, I believe
being right
that it will be
is your only concern.
Is to what?
Is to feel like you're right. That's your only concern.
No, it's not. It's not what I feel like. It's what them MPs voted for, and then it's very clear that they didn't get what they voted for. They thought that we were going to remain, and they could carry on with their pretty little careers, and as if they were the public servants.
Well, they don't look like pretty little careers now, do they? Kevin, thank you. That was a feisty one. Kevin in Harpington. Thank you to Peter in Wimbledon as well. Let's hear from Danny in Hull before we go to the news at 2. Hello, Danny.
We were just saying a minute ago about the hung parliament. I don't think you have to worry about a hung parliament next, because I think the Tories will have to link up with the Brexit party. They'll have no choice. They'll be the two biggest parties with the biggest votes.
Why will they have no choice?
Well, they'll have no choice because their vote won enough. They'll have to go into coalition with somebody, and the only party that they could go into coalition with would have to be the Brexit party, because them two parties will pick up the most votes. That's logical from what's going on.
Well, it is logical, and it's more than that. We saw it, didn't we, in the European elections? It's interesting. Nigel Farage has said today, it looks like he's thinking the way you're thinking, Danny. He said today that it has to be a no-deal Brexit, or he'll stand against the Conservative Party. Not him. His party will stand against the Conservatives in every seat in a general election. That would put the cat amongst the pigeons.
Look at where I live. I'm from the city of Hull. Well, Hull's been Labour for 40, 50 years, maybe more. But it's definitely not going to be Labour again, because you can tell that by the way you wear, the atmosphere in the streets, the way people talk, your friends, your workmates. They're never going to get elected here ever again. So then you wonder to yourself, what the power structure is going to change dramatically. If my city is replicated, if the feeling that on the street here is replicated across the north, Labour's going to be wiped out in the north.
And Danny, that huge EU/British money, because obviously we contribute, money that went into Humberside over the last 10, 15 years to revitalise some of its most sort of depressed areas.
The art centres in our city. In my city, most of the European money comes to art centres, a couple of sports centres, but it's still our money. We have an 80% trade deficit. We are net contributors, so it's our money. It's not their money. They might choose.
No, I know. It's about but it's. I know it's not.
No deal. This is what the first thing I rang up about was the no deal, where you say WTO is terrible. It's the end of the world. We won't be able to get medicines, but the fact is, under WTO, they can't refuse to sell us things. So we might have slows at the ports. They might try and be in Calais, but the Calais boss says that won't happen. And with Mervyn King saying himself, on a tariff situation, we would gain 90 billion and we would owe in tariffs 14 billion on current trade. That's a massive amount of money for the UK.
OK, well, Danny's quite relaxed about no deal. Nigel Farage gave a speech earlier on today in which he said a no-deal Brexit, the very possibility that we're talking about today, is the only acceptable deal now. The Brexit Party leader said his party would fight in every seat at a general election if the government tried to pass the existing withdrawal agreement. But he said if Boris Johnson, in his words, summons the courage to pursue a no deal, the Brexit Party would work with him. I'm joined by Catherine Kew, Brexit Party prospective parliament. I've always had trouble saying that. Prospective parliamentary candidate for Poplar and Limehouse. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Sheila.
Are you supportive of what Nigel Farage says there, that it has to be no deal now? And if so, why? Why does it have to be?
Absolutely. We support no deal, clean Brexit by end of October, because we believe that's the only way we could get our nation back on a sovereign basis, and we can make our own laws and regulations and policies. That's the best interest for the country.
And you have no concerns about the sort of hard edges of no deal that we've been warned about in the government's own papers?
I think if we could transition this period really well, I think the public has been misled by certain media in terms of the damages and negativity of Brexit. But we believe economically it will be a mitigated effect.
There was a bit of a threat in what Nigel Farage said, wasn't there? Or certainly a push to the Conservative Party about fighting them in every seat at the general election, because you know, and Nigel Farage knows, that if they do that, it's a great likelihood that they'll split the Conservative vote, big time.
We will fight every single seat, because on the assumption that Boris is not really trying to push out for the clean Brexit. So at that point, it doesn't matter to us whether we are diluting his voting shares or not. What matters to us is really the national interest, which is a clean Brexit by end of October. That's all the party and myself will be cared for.
Would a Norway-style agreement have been what you call a clean Brexit? Because that was something Nigel Farage routinely spoke about during the campaign as a favourable situation for the United Kingdom, a Norway-style agreement.
I'm not really in the area of a Norway style of agreement, but I think what we are here from the European Union is really we want to make our own laws as an independent country. Being Norway or not is not something I can comment on at the moment.
But the reason I raise that is that, you know, your party leader was saying many times in many forums on television and radio and the like that a Norway-style agreement would be an acceptable thing for the UK. Now he's gone right to the other extreme and said that it has to be a no-deal Brexit. That's quite a change.
I think ever since May, we always stick to the idea of a clean Brexit. We want democracy, we want independence, we want sovereignty. This is all the party wants at the moment.
And why is no deal more democratic than a deal, a withdrawal agreement that doesn't put medical supplies at risk, that doesn't put tariffs at risk, that doesn't put jobs at risk?
Because withdrawal agreement mainly will still subject the UK under EU laws and regulations.
Only during a transition period to stop the kind of things I've just described.
I think it will put us in a very bad position to negotiate any further after we sign the withdrawal agreement, and also that we will never leave the customs union if we sign that. For us, it's not really acceptable because we are losing our independence, and we don't want to go down that path.
And if by challenging every seat in the general election, challenging the Conservatives, of course, and others in every seat in the general election, isn't the logical conclusion of that not a rip-roaring Brexit party success, not a rip-roaring Conservative party success, but a Lib Dem Labour success? You make way for that, don't you, by splitting the Conservative vote?
Sheila, I think that's a very political talk. That's where people are trying to play political strategy. I think for the Brexit Party, we just want the national interest.
Catherine, it's political talk because a general election is a political thing. And the reality is, if your party wades in and takes on the Conservative Party, takes on Boris Johnson's Conservative Party on Brexit, and you have every right to do so, by the way, but if you do, there will be some political consequences to that, and one of them may be that you make both of your parties losers.
Sheila, again, the PPC from the Brexit Party, we don't come from a political background. We are here to fight for what we think the best for the country interest. We put country before party. So for us, we just want to fight in the general election because Boris didn't deliver the Brexit as he promised he would by end of October, and we want to see that happen. That's exactly the only reason that we are fighting for it.
So do you hope you don't have to?
We hope we don't have to. If Boris Johnson could deliver a clean Brexit by end of October, we are more than happy. I would be personally very happy to see that happening, and I would be very happy to cooperate with him on any general election whatsoever going forward, just to put country before party. And that's our strategy.
And if in this process of putting country before party you stand against Conservatives at a general election, isn't there a threat? I mean, I know you say you don't like politics or political questions, but isn't there a political threat of losing Brexit altogether there because you put a Brexit avoiding party like the Liberal Democrats arguably at the centre of power again?
We believe in Brexit. That's what people voted in 2016, and also we will be fighting to represent people. And if in the end people voted for the other parties who want to remain, and then that's not really the battle we want to fight anyway to begin with.
And what first attracted you to the Brexit Party?
I'm a first generation of Chinese immigrant over here in this country. I love this country. That's why I became a citizen. it gives me a lot of opportunity and chances. And I do believe a bright future of this country as an independent country. I want to create Britain to be a global player for everyone globally on a merit basis, being European or not. It should be a country of a global power. We are more than European. We're bigger than European country only. This is where I feel really strong about it.
Would you support Boris Johnson suspending Parliament to get no-deal Brexit through?
Any clean Brexit, I will be supportive.
So if Boris Johnson closed down Parliament, you would support that if it was to get no deal through? Because you mentioned your Chinese roots there. I mean, that's something that President Xi would be proud of, isn't it, in terms of lack of democracy?
It's a Chinese politics that I don't want to really get myself into it. Over here, I think I would support Boris Johnson, whoever in the parliament, just for the no-deal Brexit to happen. Being closed down the parliament or not is not something, if that's what it takes to get Brexit over the line, clean Brexit, that's something I'm really, really supportive of.
But you talked at I don't understand it. You talked at the very beginning about wanting parliamentary sovereignty, and your almost final comment to me is, beg a parliament, just get no deal over the line, and if it means locking out those dreadful MPs, do that. I mean, that is literally straight out of communist China. That's straight out of anti-democratic China.
I don't think I'm contradicting what I said in the beginning. All I said is I want a clean Brexit so Britain can get back independence and sovereignty.
Yes, but forgive me, Catherine Q.
Yeah.
These questions matter. These questions matter enormously. Parliament isn't just a building. Parliament is every voter who sends their MP to that building. And for Boris Johnson to say that he is going to find a way of locking those people out of that building in order to get no deal through, that is an abomination. And you seem to be saying to me that you would accept that abomination in order to get a no-deal Brexit through.
Look, if Boris Johnson decided to do that for the parliament, it's not something for me to judge whether he should do that or not. I'm here to stand in for the Brexit party just to deliver
but you said
what
at the
I
beginning
think is the best.
there is a contradiction in what you said at the beginning and what you're saying at the end of this conversation, because you said at the beginning that you are for the national interest and for parliamentary sovereignty, and you are literally saying close the doors, lock the MPs out so we can get no deal. They are mutually exclusive positions, Catherine Q.
No, I'm saying is the no deal clean Brexit is where we get our sovereignty completely. Closing down Parliament is just a means to get to that result.
Please listen back to what you've just said when our conversation is over. Murder is wrong, but stabbing the man so I could get out the room was okay, is what you've basically just said.
Shelagh, could we move on with another question?
Not really, but thank you for your time. Catherine Q, Brexit Party, PPC for Poplar and Limehouse. And let's talk about this. They are just mutually exclusive. You cannot say you join the Brexit Party in the national interest for national sovereignty, parliamentary sovereignty, and then say if the price of a no deal is locking MPs, i.e. your representative and my representatives, out of Parliament, then so be it. You can't say that, Catherine Q. You can't say that, Boris Johnson. You can't say that, anyone. 0345 6060 973. You can't say that and be taken seriously, that's for sure. It's 2:45. Lucky thing. Stephen in Dorset, also lucky thing. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to speak to that fella. What a half-wit.
Oh, is he still there? Oh, hang on,
yeah,
let's bring him back. Frank, you've been called a half-wit by Stephen.
Oh, right, okay, Stephen.
Okay, let Stephen elaborate and we'll come back to you.
I'm a Labour voter. I'm a staunch Brexiteer. So how am I a half-wit? I left school without any education whatsoever, and I've got 3 properties. My father's got a property in Spain also. So your point is what? We're not thick, right? So get off your high horse, pull your neck in. Yeah?
Go on, Frank, respond.
That's what I've got to say to you.
Say that again, Steve.
This is what we hate about British society, right? I love debating. I love people having a different point of view, which we got, and that's great.
I did say, excuse me, but I did say it was tongue-in-cheek. I'm a socialist as you
we're
are.
not educated, right? You stay in Spain. You stay there, mate, right? Don't bother coming back to this country if it's so bad.
All right, well, Stephen, hang on. Go on, Frank. Respond to it. I told you were patronising them.
Well, yes, I did. I was rather patronising, and I do agree. But I am a fellow socialist as well, and I believe in fairness. But unfortunately, because of the media in the UK, it's not fair. They're brainwashed, and that's what's going on.
You're brainwashed, Stephen.
Absolutely, that's why I'm thick. We're being brainwashed by. We're being brainwashed by who? We want to leave the EU. We want to make our own laws. We want to make our own decisions. We want to set our own tariffs at 0 or 20%. That's going to be our choice, not Brussels' choice. Our choice, Britain's choice.
We make our own laws, and our MEPs make laws in Brussels, and the MEPs are elected.
You talk like that. Which laws we're going to do that? We're going to go back to what?
Well,
how far do you want to go back?
The MEPs in the UK are elected, and they make the laws in Brussels.
Right, before we joined the EU, in 1972, there was 350,000 steelworkers in Britain. There's only 30,000 at the moment, right?
Well, you can't blame that onto the EU. That's to do with globalisation and big business.
We went through 3-4 recessions since then. The country's rubbish. We're no good. We want different. We want something different.
As a fellow socialist, where did the recessions come from? They usually happen when the Tory government's in power.
What party do you vote for? If you lived in Britain, which party would you vote for?
I vote for the Labour Party.
Well, I vote for Labour Party as well. So there you go. Right?
I'll leave it there with you both because we have to go to the headlines. So there you go. We'll finish on something like harmony, but not really when you think about it. Frank, thank you. Stephen, thank you very much indeed for your call. Stephen in Dorset, Frank in the Costa Blanca, on the Costa Blanca, I suppose, more accurately.
I know he's a moron.